What's that paper?
What a wonderful picture of Ward 4, eh, Trish?
Excuse me, I think that's Ward 3.
Okay.
I don't think.
Are we ready, folks?
From Ward 3, but not in the other Ward.
No.
Right.
I'm here.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow aldermen, are we ready?
Yeah.
All right, good evening. I'm going to call to order the Committee of Infrastructure, this being Wednesday, September 27, 2023, at 7 p.m. in the Aldermanic Chamber. Would the clerk be so kind as to call the roll?
Alderman Jettie?
Here.
Alderman Gavea?
Here.
Alderman Camo is here. Alderman Dowd?
Present.
And Alderman O'Brien.
Present.
Also in attendance, you have Alderman Tebow, Alderman Lopez, Alderman Klee, Matt Sullivan, Tim Cummings, Amy DeRoche, and John Vancor.
Thank you. We're now open up the meeting at this particular time. Public comment. Public comment is people may speak of anything that's on the agenda for 3 minutes. Is anybody wishing to come up and to address the board? Seeing none, we'll go to communications.
There are none.
Okay. Discussions tonight, and before we get into that, there's a couple of house cleaning items I'd like to bring up. Tonight, there was supposed to be a meeting on the Public Works building. Unfortunately, there seemed to have been a question on the posting and everything, and to do it right, we agreed to postpone the meeting. Nothing's mission critical. Actually, quite frankly, we're wrapping up the project and it's quite healthy and quite pleased with the way things are going. But to do it correctly, we'll reschedule to another date. Our agenda this evening was pretty clean. We didn't have anything, and I could have called no meeting tonight. But I know the dedication of this committee, always looking for that extra work or something to do and to stay informed. I did have a conversation with the Administrative Services Director, Mr. Cummings, and he has agreed to bring us up to date on several projects. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity to educate ourselves, get an understanding of them, as also to the public. So without further ado, I welcome Administrative Services Director Cummings. Good evening, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if we could, I'd like Amy DeRoche, John Vancor, and Matt Sullivan to join me, as they'll be playing a critical role in the conversation.
Absolutely. Please come in. Please grab an extra seat somewhere.
And may I approach to grab the keyboard so we can walk you through?
Well, I don't know. Have you met security clearance?
Don't let me get too close.
He's wearing a vest, don't trust him. So again, good evening. Tim Cummings, Administrative Services Director, and as Chairman O'Brien alluded to in his opening remarks, I thought it would be a good opportunity to take the time this evening, as you have a light agenda, to accomplish hopefully two goals on my front. One, to provide relative status updates on various projects that may be of interest to this committee, but then also have a discussion about next steps, thoughts, ideas, concerns, and hopefully have a discussion about a couple projects that are coming down the pike, where your input and feedback will be extremely valuable in helping us further develop these projects as they come to hopefully fruition. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cummings, would you prefer, are you going to handle it line subject by subject, and then that could be open to discussion per that particular subject, and when the board is satisfied or the committee is satisfied, we'll move on? And then the second question, as you're making your presentation, would you entertain questions from the committee, or do you want to wait to the end of your presentation?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to keep this rather informal and casual, so questions as we go, and hopefully have more of a dialogue than anything else. The first two of the three discussions that I plan to have this evening are somewhat interrelated, but everything we kind of do when it comes to infrastructure, it goes hand in glove, and there's always these interconnections that are in play. So, you know, I feel there'll be some overlap this evening between the three various discussions, but I can tell you explicitly between discussion 1 and discussion 2 there will be. Discussion 1, if I may make the segue right into it, is going to be on providing you all with an update on the riverfront project, and specifically talking about what you should anticipate seeing going under construction over the next year. And to be able to do that, we have some right-of-way and road design projects that will need to occur to effectuate the riverfront, and then also just the general redevelopment of our infrastructure in the downtown. That's the second item, and then the third item will be a discussion about on passenger rail, just providing you with an overall update. If there's time this evening to have a discussion about other subject matters that are of interest to you, of course, I'm available. But these were three very specific topics that it had been a little while since we've come before you to provide you an update on, and I thought it was important for us to do that. So to my right, I have John Vancore of Hayner Swanson. He's the project manager for the city on the implementation of the downtown riverfront, and Amy DeRoche, Economic Development Project Manager, who is also assisting with the implementation. And so I'm going to hand it off to them for this PowerPoint presentation. And again, try to, if we can, Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, if we could keep this informal and ask questions as we go.
Absolutely. The board got it, and I think they do. We're all set. And welcome, Mr. Vancourt, to the chamber. And Mr. Rosa, good to see you again.
And I said to my right, I should have said to my left, I apologize.
No, well, it's actually to my right. Never mind.
Starboard.
So if we could hand it off to Mr. Vancore?
Yes, please, Mr. Vancourt.
Okay, thank you very much. So primarily, we're here to give you an update on the design development of Bicentennial and Renaissance Park, part of the overall riverfront project. And I'd like to start by making a personal comment related to Renaissance Park. I'm particularly gratified to be part of the city's team on this project. 22 years ago, the last time Renaissance Park was reconstructed, I was on the team for that project as well, and so I was part of the group that decided where and how to site the statue that's there, the mill woman with her child. I know how much people cared about it, what a large group of people it was that had insight and the importance of the backdrop and the location. And so I'm very gratified to be part of this project, to do a dramatic expansion of that park at the same time respecting and revering that statue. So, but we'll start by talking about Bicentennial Park. And one of the keys in everything we've done since, from preliminary design to where we are now, which is in the final stages of final design, in total, the city has taken a fresh look at the entire project, and one of the goals in this fresh look was to improve access for people of all abilities, to improve the ADA access, basically with the idea that complying with ADA isn't enough. We want to do the best we can to open the opportunities of this recreation project to people of all abilities. And Bicentennial Park, I bring that up now because Bicentennial Park is a great example to use to talk about these kind of improvements. If we went out to Bicentennial Park now and walked from Main Street to the westerly end of the park, it's a very steep path. It's challenging from an ADA compliance perspective, and even more so to make it, as I say, optimizing accessibility. And we think we've got to design, in order to flatten the slope, basically we need to make the length of the path longer. The challenge in doing that is to end up with a path that people will actually want to walk that little extra distance. It'll seem natural. It won't seem like they're walking out of their way. And I think the design that we have does that. You can see the path there, and you can see the gathering location adjacent to the river. Now, we're developing this on our team. We've been working closely with a team of landscape architects from Weston and Sampson, led by Cassie Bethany. I really want to call them out because it's been extraordinary working with them. They have listened closely to the city's project team. They listen, they collaborate, and they create. And they've been instrumental in developing what I think is a really effective effective green space here on Bicentennial Park. I think we've got a great design that we're working towards. Here we have a rendering of Bicentennial Park. You can see that same walking path. You can see the gathering space. And you can also, in the distance, you can see the boardwalk at the very end of the park. The boardwalk is going to go adjacent to the 4 Water Street building. And here, too, we're fortunate. We have the firm of H.L. Turner working with us. H.L. Turner is the company that designed the boardwalk adjacent to Peddler's Daughter. And so this boardwalk will be detailed, designed to be compatible, to be a match for that boardwalk and Peddler's Daughter. Oop. And so here's another view of Bicentennial Park. You can see that gathering location. You can see the backdrop, an important part of all of our designs, the backdrop emphasizing the view down the river towards Clock Tower, towards the mill yard. Next one. So now we're going to Renaissance Park. To get here, we would have used that boardwalk. To do it today, we would have had to go downstairs at the end of Bicentennial Park. We would have had to go into an alley and go around the 4 Water Street building. But the boardwalk, which is on the right side of this plan, gives us an opportunity to go directly to the park. There's a lot of improvements here, and the reason we can do these improvements is the existing parking spaces that are located adjacent to the Water Street retaining wall. Those are going to be, the proposal is to relocate those parking spaces primarily onto Water Street itself. It gives us all of this room to do so much more with this park. You can see the little square right in the center of the park. That's the statue. That's where it is today. That's where it will be when we're done. We're not relocating the statue. One of the other key focal points is to the left of that statue. You can see the shape that is our performing arts stage. We've looked at a number of alternatives for siting this stage, and we're really happy with this one. Working with, again, Weston and Sampson, they've done a study to make sure, even though it's generally facing to the west, we don't have to worry about the sunset getting in the audience's eyes. So we've got that stage there. Part of that stage, when we get to the renderings, you'll see that we've got a structure over it. We've got a roof over that stage. Park McDowell is an architect and an artist who's worked with us on that. You'll see when we get to the renderings that he's developed a design that works really well. That stage shares the same backdrop as the statue. It's Clock Tower, it's the mill yard behind. And so we're happy with that. Could we just go back to the, before we go on to the renderings, I just wanted to point out there's pavement, there's pavers in front of the stage. You can't quite see it. There's a floor-de-lay that's going to be set in the middle of those pavers. That's a detail that's over by the statue. We're not going to be able to keep that, which was an inherent part of the original design, but we're moving it here in front of the stage in a very high-focus location. To the right of that, we have terrace seating for the audience. We have a grass area where people could put blankets, watch a show. And then on the other side of the terrace seating in that oval area, we have a relatively flat lawn space. And so this is a rare opportunity downtown. Lawn uses, someone could toss a Frisbee, someone could toss a ball, or could, again, put a blanket on the grass and enjoy that. Talked before about accessibility and improvements for access. We're proposing to remove the stairs that go down to the park now, and we're going to replace them with ramps both to the left and to right, again, to accentuate accessibility for all. Okay, now, and so,
Could I ask a question?
Oh, yes, Alderman Jettie.
If you could go back to the previous slide. So, if you could help me. So where's the stage? Is that brown thing there?
Mm-hmm.
it's to the left side, the trapezoidal-shaped roof structure there.
Okay. And you said that's facing west?
It's facing to the east, but the backdrop for the audience will be looking to the west.
Okay.
And so our fear there is that we don't want the audience to have the afternoon sun in their eyes.
Okay, now I understand. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question, Chairman.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on both parks, I didn't see lighting. I assume that's just not in the picture. Will there be like some small lights and stuff? Okay, awesome, thank you.
Okay, so here's a rendering, and we're looking, you can see clock tower behind. The lawn area, we can sort of see where the performing arts stage is. And so this is the general layout, and let's go to the next one. And this is
Yeah,
actually from...
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Mr. Frank. We did have one more question from Alderman Clee, and so, I hate to interrupt you, but
Yeah, just two quick questions. I think I was a little confused when you were talking about the statue
Mhm.
of the mother and child. That is going to stay where it is, and where does the stage in conjunction with that? I'm sorry, even with my glasses, I really can't. See it?
I think one of our renderings might show it better.
Over there in the corner? I think I'll get glasses with that. Okay, and you said the floor delay that's there now, that's going,
Yeah, we're gonna have, in order to get the path adjacent to the statue, we're going to have to pave right up against it. We didn't want to lose that as a park element, and so
Right.
we're bringing it forward into the pavers in front of the
Okay,
stage.
so we're not really losing, just relocating?
We're going to relocate it.
That's
It's
fine,
still,
'cause
it's still
I was
going to
gonna say
have a
that's a key
very
element
prominent,
to the- yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that from 22 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
excuse me, Director Cummings, do you have the pointer besides the mouse? You have the,
Yes, I don't know if,
that might help others orientate a little bit better if you want to.
all right, so, yep, thank you. So, I don't know, it doesn't show up on the sheet.
Yeah, because of
If
the
you use the
screen.
mouse pointer, you might
Yeah.
be able to.
It doesn't,
You-
oh, there we go.
Yeah, if you follow the arrow. yeah.
So that's the stage,
Right,
and right in front of it, well,
There
that's
it
the
is.
statue right there.
okay, okay.
And then show where the Florida.
Oh, the,
Yeah,
Right
right
there.
there, right
It's right
there,
there.
right
It's
there.
literally- I see it there. Okay,
That's
yeah.
right there.
Okay, thank you,
Yep.
thank you.
Alderman Dow.
So I was going to wait probably later slides, but I see these beautiful grass banks. We spent a lot of time and effort getting rid of invasive species. Have any of them reappeared? And if they have, how are we taking care of them?
So I'm gonna take the liberty of saying that that's a little artistic
Licensing.
liberty, license. I want to be clear, that is not what you're going to see at the end product. As I've learned through this project, there's what's called riprap that is going to be along the side there, and that would not change. Part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing is we don't really want to affect the riverbank at all. From a state permitting perspective, and from an environmental perspective, we really want to stay away from affecting the riverbank, and this design accomplishes that goal, and that's one of the reasons why we're pursuing it.
But is there still any regrowth of invasive species?
So to the second question there is no, we are actively managing and staying on top of it. We are on a routine schedule for continuous spraying, and we are making that a concerted effort and priority because we can't have those invasives grow back.
Okay, have Alderman Lopez and then Alderman Clay in the queue.
In the graphic up there, it kind of shows an even level between the park and Water Street. Are you guys adding a lot of dirt to the park, or are you lowering Water Street?
We're actually, there's quite a bit of grade that we're raising against the retaining wall on Water Street. A key part of that is we have the stairs that come down from Water Street now. So on either side of that, we're going to have an accessible ramp that we construct against the retaining wall. And so basically, we will be bringing a lot of fill in to have that gradual ramp that comes down to grade.
But it might make the area less floodable, so I would like that.
Yeah, actually, we've done analysis from the river perspective on the floodplain. We're not impacting the floodplain at all. We've done considerable, H.L. Turner has done considerable modeling and evaluation of that. So we don't think that there isn't a modeled impact to the floodplain at all.
Okay.
Alderman Clay?
I hope this isn't out of context, but, so is this part of the TIF
Yes.
thing? So your invasive, like what you're doing over Jackson Falls, it's all part of that contract? Is that what
Correct.
you're looking at? So perfect, thank you.
Okay, good.
Yes, perfect, thank you.
All right.
Okay. And so here's another rendering. Now we're looking towards the performing arts stage. You can see the roof that I referred to before, the backdrop that we think is pretty nice to see Clock Tower and the mill yard behind. You can see on the left side, you can see the retaining wall, the Water Street retaining wall. There's opportunities for a new mural there as we complete the construction. There will be grading against the wall, but there will still be an area in this portion of the project. People are sitting on the terraced seating, the grass in front of it, and then the pavers. And here from the side of the performing arts shell or stage, again, you can see looking out towards where the audience will be. Again, you can see the Water Street profile there. We think the way this is laid out, it'll reduce the visual impact of Water Street adjacent to us, and with a mural, we can get a benefit from that. So overall, we also wanted to give you an update on where we are with the construction schedule. There's a number of elements of the project that we expect will be out to construction, be constructed next year. Presently, I'm going to start on the upper left, and the new ADA ramp. Contractor's been selected. They'll be starting up soon, but starting up for that, there's a long lead time on a lot of their supplies to build a ramp from the Cotton Transfer Bridge down to the path. So that will be under construction in 2024. As we go around, the next one is substation screening. We're working with Eversource. Again, Park McDowell's worked with us, designed a artistic structure to help break up the view of that substation. Our expectation is through the fall, we'll be working with Eversource, iron out the details with them so that we can get that under contract and under construction next year. Then pedestrian boardwalks, we have a boardwalk from that area that goes up to the northerly bank, and then a boardwalk along the northerly bank to where it ties in at Main Street. Again, final design is being completed by H.L. Turner, and that will be advertising over the winter. There's I think we had previously announced we had all the permits in hand, but part of that fresh look to improve the accessibility led to a change in the design of the boardwalk right about where the cursor is now. We have a flatter path for the boardwalk. It'll be, I think, a very significant improvement, but it does change the impacts within the river. And so next week we'll be submitting documentation to DES. We've had an initial meeting with them. We expect this to pass through to get their concurrence and approval, but it's going to take them a few months to review that and give it the okay. So we expect we'll be advertising for construction of the boardwalks sometime probably February, sometime in the winter for construction in 2024. Coming around, the Bicentennial Park is going to be put out for construction in a contract along with Parc de la Renaissance together. That's in final design right now. It's kind of down to, there was a comment about lighting, it's kind of down to the final detailing of the lighting and the landscaping and a few other issues, and otherwise we will wrap up the design this fall, advertise for construction in the winter, and we expect an early spring startup for the park projects. And then coming along to Pine Street Extension, next year we'll be having constructed a new crosswalk at approximately the location shown, and if you've been in the area, you probably know that people cross in that area as opposed to where the crosswalks are presently. So we've got quite a bit of work that we will have under construction next year.
Okay, Chair has a question to Director, Mr. Cummings, Administrative Services. Wonderful project, everything's going on, but it's a true infrastructure question. We have an interceptor for stormwaters in that particular area. There's another parking lot that's up on Mechanic Street that kind of feeds into. So all these plans have been brought up that the existing infrastructure is all set. I hate to see us build something, then we have to tear it up because of old pipe or whatever is the reason, but we are in communications with them, and that's basically it, yeah,
Yes, yes, Mr. Chairman.
okay. Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. So on one of the slides where you showed the stage, it looked to me like the stage was, yeah, that slide there. It looks like it's it's not elevated. Is my perception correct?
You're correct.
It's not elevated.
Yeah, the decision, we went back and forth on that, and the feeling was that for all of the times it's not a performance, that's additional space people could be using, they could be sitting, it could be a shady structure, and we felt that for times when there's not a performance, it would feel more like part of the park that could be used.
Okay.
Okay, we have Alderman Caveva with Alderman Lopez in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at the overall project as a whole, who's in charge of the maintenance here? Is this something we contract out for, or are we doing this in-house?
Nope, great question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. It is all anticipated and as of to date, been third-party contract. That was actually something that Alderman Dowd instilled in me when we first started the conversation of using TIF and TIF funds and not wanting to overburden our Public Works Department. So the plan will be for it to be maintained by a third party.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Lopez.
Two things. The structure, the retaining wall, are there going to be repairs to that? Because as you were talking about the murals, I remembered that there's sections where there's some deep cracking and a lot of water running down that. And then secondly, the roof of the staged-in area, is that far enough away from the edge that people won't try to like jump onto it?
So the first question, there has been some evaluation on the walls, and that's ongoing, and that's part of a separate effort related to the bridge. It's a great question. It's one that we haven't fully completed our evaluation of. For your question, it's hard to tell from this angle to your second question. That might be a little easier.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, I can see it better now. Yes.
Yeah, the back wall, there's actually a gap of about 10 feet between that back wall and the retaining wall, the Water Street retaining wall. So the concern that someone might be up on Water Street and want to get out onto the roof, we put an offset to avoid that very concern.
Okay, because there are skaters that come down that little rampy area next to Alderman Jetty's office, and they seem fearless, so just got to outthink them a little.
Oh, they're gonna ollie up onto that roof.
They try. I'm more worried about the failure.
Let's not give everybody a bad idea here, okay?
Let's put up a sign.
Don't do what you're thinking of.
Yes. Ignore Alderman Lopez.
Alderman Theobald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I mean, I think the slides that you guys have shown have looked beautiful. I'm just glad, Director Cummings, you're not using a new market tax credit. But, you know, this area is, you know, very important to me because of the mills and the natural history and stuff. And so I think it looks great. I can't wait to see it all show up. When, you know, I saw the 2024 construction, when would we have the plans to wrap up all of this? Would we finish in '24 or?
No.
Okay.
No, I would defer to Mr. Vancor on the timeline, but I think it's a 2-year construction cycle.
Yeah, it's definitely into a second year. Whether we can shave a few months off at the end of 2025 or not, I think one of the things that remains for us to do is to really look hard now that the plans are near final, to look at staging. When we put it out to bid, we'll want to look to see if it makes sense to identify key milestones like the area around the stage, wanting an early completion of that so there could possibly be some use of that while remaining work on other parts of the park continue. We just haven't had that discussion yet, but that in the normal design process is really what we'll be doing now.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Caveva.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up back to my first question, is there an estimated amount of what it is going to be yearly to renovate once this is all fully open and functional?
Maintained.
Yeah, to be maintained.
So current budget in this is kind of what we're working toward, is, around $250,000 annually to maintain. And that is a big part of what we're thinking about, because, and this kind of segues right into a talking point I wanted to bring up, is we're designing to a budget. And so we have a certain amount of money that we can spend, and we have the debt service available to pay for it through the TIF, but we need to factor in operations and maintenance, annual costs in that. We won't know the true costs until we obviously put this out to bid, but we are very much keeping that in the forefront of our mind.
Alderman Clay.
Thank you. Again, this is great looking, and I just recently did the mill tour that the mayor and so on had arranged for their anniversary and so on. And so a little bit of this was discussed, but what was also discussed in it is one of my favorite subjects, the loss of parking within that area, and the changing of the direction of the road and everything. Are we actually going to lose any? I know there's going to be more parking up on Water Street and so on. So will there be any true loss of parking, or will it just be moved? Is my first question. The second question is, part of this is also to change the direction of Water Street and make it just a single one-way, correct? Is that what the overall?
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely.
So that's actually a great segue to kind of talk about item number 2 on my list here, which is sorry, bear with me.
Well, can we, Mr. Cummings, can we hold that thought for a second, if you don't mind? The chair does have one question before we get into number 2. And the question is more for the public. Could you take a brief moment and explain the TIF? People, we are in a political season. People are wondering what we're doing with tax dollars and everything else like that. So the major funding for this, where is it coming from with the TIF? And I think it's a wonderful opportunity at this meeting to explain to the public and exactly how we're doing here, in grants and everything else like that. So please.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chairman. So a little ancient history. We started embanking on a riverfront redevelopment, if you will, back in the early 2000s. And we started the river walk actually on the other side of the river with the Kathy Hirsch path that you may be aware of, which is over by Jackson Falls. And so we did that through a quote-unquote TIF. And then we, I would say, went quiet for a while in this area. And then back in 2015 timeframe, we studied this area in really trying to bring a new thought process to the riverfront. And what we've seen other very successful cities do is re-image or reimagine their waterfront area, their river, as we change from an industrial use of your river to more of a residential use or an enjoyment of a mix of uses in your downtown as a redevelopment strategy and natural asset that would be a value proposition for us. We developed a master plan in 2015 relative to this area, and it had this idea of an expansion of a river walk, as well as accomplishing a few other goals: economic development, environmental stewardship. We had 4 or 5 guiding principles, and it talked about some amenities that could occur down in the riverfront area that would enhance everyone's enjoyment of the waterway. And recognizing that the city had limited funds to be able to implement this, in 2017, 2018 timeframe, there was the idea of expanding the tax increment financing area that was originally created in and around the Jackson Falls area that really focused on the Veterans Memorial Parkway Bridge crossing to what we did refer to affectionately the Pan Am Railroad crossing on the other side of the river. That was essentially phase 3, I believe, off the top of my head, of the master plan, which was a 4-phased project. And we wanted to basically use the tax dollars that were captured in Lofts 34 with their redevelopment and rededicate it back to the area that the taxes were generated in. And so that's why we expanded the TIF district. And so we accumulate somewhere around $1 million to 1.5, depending on the year, of tax dollars that have to be spent within this TIF district. And that is what's led us to the bond authorization of, around, off the top of my head, $22 million to be able to finance the implementation of the master plan, and which is why this project is able to be implemented, not through your general bonding process, but through the TIF funds that were set aside. So anyway, so I hopefully that captures it, and happy to take any questions about TIFs in particular if anyone has any.
Alderman Lopez.
Are there sunset dates and timeouts for the TIF?
Yes.
Particularly, I'm sure the public would not like to see money being captured only to benefit an area and a special outsourced DPW, and then the rest of the city is stuck with like our regular outstanding services. But, if we're going to be doing these developments, there should be a point where we stop developing and start sharing.
So a TIF district statutorily can be in place for up to 40 years, and that's rather a long length of time, but it was done very wisely because you want to be able to cover the cost of bonds. And so, you need to give confidence to the financial markets that there would be a source of funds to repay the loan. And so a TIF can be statutorily authorized up to 40 years, and then it could be reauthorized if the community so desired, but you have to take some sort of action by that 40th year. Now, I'm not suggesting that this TIF be in existence for that entire 40 years. I'm just being very technical in my answer. The current bond, that authorization only contemplated a 20-year type of repayment schedule, and I would suggest that would be the minimum type of commitment that this community should make to be able to proceed in good stead.
Further questions on TIFs or anything? Okay, I didn't give you a good segue like Alderman Clee did, but if you can get into number.
Yeah, absolutely.
items,
So that's great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So part of the conversation I wanted to have tonight is the idea of reversing Water Street. And so to implement or execute the vision that we've been talking about over the last few years, you saw Water Street needing to be made one-way and reversed, and that's to accommodate parking on Water Street. I would never say that there isn't going to be a loss of parking. I think I would be disingenuous to say we are going to keep all the parking there, but we are trying to do everything feasibly possible to maintain as much parking as we can. To do that, we need to create on-street parking on Water Street.
Right.
And so to do that, we need to make Water Street one-way. Everything that I'm saying right now is not new. This is something that we have been discussing at least since 2016. But we're getting to a point now where we're at a level of design and we want to go to construction. We are going to need legislation authorizing this. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation this evening is because I anticipate legislation coming before you over the next couple months on this very specific topic. And I just thought it would be good for us to talk about it in conjunction with a couple other activities that are going on right now, which is the squaring off of the Walnut Street Oval, or sometimes referred to as the Courthouse Oval. And this is, again, nothing new, a conversation that we have been discussing at least since the mid-2000s, and then even before that, I'm aware of, because the idea is to connect the Broad Street Parkway down on through to Main Street as like the last phase of the Broad Street Parkway project. And it contemplated the idea of squaring off this this urban renewal project where there was a courthouse built in an oval, and the idea is to square this off and reinstitute the street grid, if you will. And so just so this kind of shows at a very high level what we're talking about in terms of reintroducing the street grid. This is a very high level concept that was developed back in like 2015, 2016 that really just talks about trying to square this off. Another concept kind of did the same thing. Again, is the idea of introducing something right here and right here. Again, just to try to square this off. What I'm showing you, I want to be explicitly clear. These are concepts. These are not designs by any stretch. This is just to kind of help give you a visual cue of what we are going to be looking to talk about over the next few months. New Hampshire DOT has authorized some money for this project. We have started the scoping exercise to implement the squaring off of the Walnut Street Oval. And so public outreach is going to begin in earnest for this conversation. We are under some time pressure because in addition to the New Hampshire DOT monies that were set aside, we got some congressionally directed funding as well on top of that. And so with that being said, we know we need to move this project forward. And so there's an open house, I believe, scheduled or a town hall type meeting scheduled for November 9th at 6 p.m. here in City Hall, where we will start to take public input on the ideas on this concept and on this project specifically. Another concept I could show you, done by Hayner Swanson, a wonderful engineering firm that just talks about how you could square this off in a way that makes it a little bit more pedestrian friendly. It then also brings about the conversation about reversing West Pearl Street. And so the idea is to bring the traffic from the highway down Broad Street Parkway, Pine Street Extension, Central Street to West Pearl Street right to Main Street. And so we are going to need to have legislation sometime in the near future, not as quickly as Water Street by any stretch, but if we are going to start designing in this fashion, we need to make sure everyone is aware of the fact that we're going to need to reverse West Pearl Street. Again, nothing new here. This is stuff we've talked about since, in earnest since mid-2000s, but even before that. To have a good comfort level that we were acting in good stead with these independent roadway projects, our city engineer, very wisely, very astutely pulled me and a couple other folks aside and imparted some good wisdom, which is we need to all look at this holistically. We can't do these one-offs. And so we with his direction, did a downtown circulation study. We did one back in 2015 or thereabouts, and we have since updated it, and we'll be coming before you over, again, the next few months, probably sometime before the calendar year ends, to give you an overall update on the downtown circulation so everyone has confidence that if we were to do one solitary action, we would not be negatively impacting somewhere else. And so, again, I wanted to kind of flag that, put that all on your radar. To date, the data that we've seen and all the conversations we've had with VHB, the engineer that is conducting this study, leads us to believe we are all acting in good stead to make some very good public policy decisions. But nonetheless, I wanted to flag this for you, and I ultimately want to come back before you, again, sometime in the next month or two, to have that more complex, detailed downtown circulation conversation. and then you could, implement as you see fit. But nonetheless, the Water Street and the West Pearl Street roadway projects are going to be, top of mind or front on the burner. And so I felt it was the least I could do to revisit this conversation with you all, make you well aware of it.
Okay, we have a question from Alderman Clay and then seeing Alderman Dowd, but Chair does have a question. I know it's early in the process, but on the Water Street, is NFR, an active participant in, because depending upon which way we decide of the travel, that is an entry point for the tree streets for the Emmett Street station.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
The fire department has been intimately involved in this conversation.
Outstanding.
From day one, and actually the direction chosen for Water Street was actually at their recommendation or suggestion, so we can accommodate their needs.
Outstanding. Good. Good. All right, let me see, Alderman Clay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. You know how I feel about the West Pearl. I've wanted that flipped upside down for a long time, especially since we've been talking about the Performing Arts Center. But my question actually is going to go back to Water Street. You said that they chose the direction of it. So is the direction to go from Main Street or to Main Street? From Main Street, right? Perfect, great. Would this also, so the return of it would be like Factory Street, when I always like to think of one way going one way, the other way, so that would be good. And as you pointed out, if we can change the direction of West Pearl, coming off the Broad Street Parkway, we can actually keep people off of Main Street and still let them hit both garages, both the High Street and the Elm Street, without ever having to hit Main Street. Even if they come off Factory Street, they can still go around that oval or square, whatever you want to call it, and still hit the two with not having to focus in on Main Street, correct?
Correct.
Which is something that we've talked about for a long time, to take off the pressure off of Main Street and redirect in the back end. And I'm only saying this more for the public's ears, because this has been a big issue, is to get the stress off of Main Street, but still allow the shopping and foot traffic on Main Street.
Yes, Alderman Clee, you're absolutely correct. This downtown circulation is not just about Main Street, but it's actually taking into consideration the ancillary and side streets just as much as the conversation of the major corridor, which is obviously is Main Street. But the downtown circulation study talks about opening up Spring Street, so Spring Street could be two-way, and studies that and makes a very affirmative recommendation that we look at implementing that. And so I say that just to hit home the point that there are going to be a lot of mini or micro recommendations that all interplay with one another that we may or may not choose to elect to pursue. And we will have that conversation with you. I guess the reason why I wanted to have this conversation explicitly tonight is the time-sensitive ones are going to be Water Street, absolutely, because we can't go under construction with the design that we're talking about right now unless there's a comfort level with Water Street. West Pearl Street, not as time-sensitive, but is definitely coming down the pike with the time pressures that I've talked to you about relative to the squaring off of the oval.
Okay, we have Alderman Dowd next, but Alderman Como in the queue.
Just a couple things. One,
Are
when
you
we
done?
do this massive change, people are resistant to change. So, and we can't have this all decided here in this chamber. We probably need ward meetings as you try to introduce this and work with the general public to get a consensus on the change. And if we do it all at once, I can see, just from my 30 years of logistics, it's gonna be a logistics nightmare. To all of a sudden switch everything overnight, we already have people come into Nashua and get lost when they get to the Oval. If we start changing things, even the Nashua people will get lost. So it's something to think about. The other thing is, School Street's gonna be starting their rentals in October, I believe. Have we looked at the traffic issues on those streets?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And to that point, we have next is going to be Alderman Como, then Alderman Lopez. But the chair would like to take note. It's been past tradition of the Infrastructure Committee to actually meet twice a month, you know, if need be. But the workload has been somewhat light, you know. So now it looks like we're going to have some pending projects. So be prepared. I may actually call for a meeting of twice a month. We do have those little pesky stop signs we have to deal with, but, you know, those are equally important as well. But I'm willing to do it, and I hope that everybody is, to really get these projects ready for the spring and everything. So Alderman Como.
Oh, yes, thank you. So Director Cummings, I know we've talked about this a number of times. You know I'm a supporter of the project. But I'm curious, I know you said that these are just conceptual designs, obviously nothing's final or anything, but on most of them, they involve significant changes to the inside of the oval. Does Pennachuck have any plans to relocate? Or, I mean, I know they just finished a lot of construction there. Is that building going to remain as is?
Yes, great question. A lot of what you were seeing was pre-Pennachuck actually going in there. That was back when the building was empty. Again, this is not a new issue. This is something we've been talking about since the mid-2000s, and we've had some of these design concepts developed prior to the courthouse actually being filled. And so I'm not exactly sure when this one was developed, but I'm pretty sure that this one that you're looking at right here was developed probably back in the 2014, 2015 timeframe. And so, you know, this was really the way I wanted to approach this conversation and helping to tease out with visual cues what this area could look like. That's all this is right now, is to just kind of show you, hey, this area is in play, it's changing, and hopefully over the next few months, we will take that community input and we will take that feedback and we will actually develop a design. And what we know is we have construction dollars allocated, and we will actually develop a construction project over the next few years. What you're seeing here is not going to come about anytime soon. It's going to come about in a few years from now, and you'll ultimately see this come to fruition. Something that will accomplish goals that I've heard this community talk about, making something pedestrian friendly, helping make things complete streets type concept with, you know, multimodal type transportation, trying to connect people from the Broad Street Parkway to Main Street. These are the goals I've heard you talk about, and we will start to look at designs that implement some of these values.
Alderman Lopez.
Since the designs are kind of older, and we've had things like the one-way do not enter signs put in over by the bus station and such, when you have the Performing Arts Center getting out, are you going to send 600 people down Garden Street, or?
I'm sorry, say that again, Alderman Lopez?
So the Performing Arts Center,
Yep.
if they have a show and there's like 600 people,
Yep.
and the people who are parked there can't go out through the bus station or anything, then do they go out through Garden Street because they can't go, I mean, if Westboro's going the wrong way, you're either dumping a bunch of cars onto Main Street, or people are trying to go home and they're gonna wanna leave the area. And the two streets that are right adjacent to that exit, other than Westboro, are very small.
Well, you'd be on Walnut.
You-
I'm sorry, you'd be on Elm Street. You'd be on Elm Street and you'd make a left, or you'd make a right, I guess. And so
Yeah, if you go right, you're going back on Main Street.
you're gonna
that's
be
what I was
going
saying.
back on Main Street, and I would say you're only gonna do that if you're going east, right? You're only gonna do that if you're gonna travel east, but if you are gonna be traveling, you know, west or north, I fully anticipate that you'd be going left out of the garage on Elm Street.
Because you're making a bunch of one-way streets, like Factory Street would be going back to Main Street, that looks great if you can get onto the right part of it, but if not, you're gonna get stuck right in the middle of downtown. So just hoping you're considering that, how traffic might, if we don't come up with a solution, you're gonna send a lot of cars through some narrow neighborhoods.
Understood, and it's a point well taken. I think when we actually start to get into the real deeper conversation, you might hear more of a conversation of two-way traffic more than one-way.
Okay.
And so, you know, that's part of the conversation that we'd be looking to have.
Okay, Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. So, you know, it was great to hear that Engineer Hudson, you know, is advocating for a broader look, you know, and I hope the broader look includes the east side of Main Street as well. I think they're all, you know, when you start changing the one-way system, you know, I think it has repercussions on the east side. You know, like, you know, right now, you know, the traffic, you know, Factory is one way going east onto Temple, which goes east, and then you've got West Pearl going west and onto, I mean, East Pearl going west onto West Pearl. If you change West Pearl and you don't change East Pearl, you're gonna, you know, there's a,
I couldn't agree more, Alderman Jettie. I think we started this conversation by saying that this absolutely, each thing has an element that affects another area of the city, and we need to be cognizant of that. So yes, your point is well taken. We need to be very conscious of that. I'm going to answer your question by saying, yes, we're absolutely taking the east side of Main Street into consideration. I'm going to actually hand it off to Director Sullivan, though. Hopefully he can talk into a little bit more detail about the boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Director Cummings. And Mr. Chair, if I may respond
Absolutely.
to Alderman Jettie. When we do come forward with the presentation on the downtown circulation update, as I'll phrase it, you'll see several components to that, but above all else, you'll see the scope of the study area really is bounded on the north side by the bridge, the Main Street Bridge itself, and our newly reconstructed CSX crossing, of course. And then on the east side by Spruce Street generally, Pine Street to the west, and then really East and West Hollis Street to the south. While that boundary exists, I would communicate that it's a porous boundary in the sense that at the extents of those boundaries, we're considering traffic counts and vehicle volumes that are moving through all of those areas. And so all of the results that are ultimately presented to you at a later meeting, whether in October or November, will contemplate not only the volumes that we observed within that study area, but those that are entering it. And we actually contemplated potential future developments, such as the School Street, High Street, new residential building, and even some down the road developments that we think might be in the pipeline within that downtown corridor area, but also outside of it. And so frankly, I would suggest that we took a very conservative approach and overestimated volumes, both now and in the future, but we hope to present that to you at that time in October and November.
okay. And
Follow up?
if I could just, yeah, and maybe, you know, I think you alluded to the possibility of abandoning this one-way system and going back to a two-way system, you know, which could have some benefits of calming the traffic down.
Definitely.
You know, and solving some of these problems.
Agreed.
Okay, are we prepared to be done with the water and West Pearl Street? Good. We seem to be chugging right along, and I appreciate everybody staying on track. So with that as a segue, let's open up the discussion on our next stop is the commuter rail.
Yes, passenger rail, and I have a handout, and I apologize.
Please, feel free to pass it out.
Thank you.
And let the record show, we are accepting a communication from Assistant Ms. Cummings there, and show that on the record. Thank you. So without objection, we'll accept the communication. Members of the committee, all set? Very good.
I have an extra one.
Yes. Oh, yeah, please.
It sits on my chest, so I don't have to hold it. Want to do
All right, so, Mr. Chairman, again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Administrative Services Director, and with me to join me in this conversation is Director Matt Sullivan. He and I, along with Jamin Kara, as some of you may know, a Nashua resident, also Executive Director of the National Regional Planning Commission, have been working over the last few months on the commuter rail / passenger rail issue. And so what I wanted to do this evening is provide you with a status update as to what we've been working on over the last 6 or so months, and sort of telegraph what we anticipate coming about down the pike over the next few months, should you all be in agreement. And so just for setting of the table purposes, and particularly for the viewers watching, 6-9 months ago, the state, in their wisdom, made a decision to stop the contract that was underway relative to designing the project design phase of the expansion of passenger rail into New Hampshire. The Governor's Council elected not to extend a contract amendment that would give additional time for the contract to be finished up. And so with that happening, that kind of put a pause in at least the statewide level conversation on this subject. And when that pause occurred, when that contract it did not get continued or extended, the question then arose as to whether there was an appetite to continue the study of this project design phase at some other level of government, whether that's the local, regional, county, but nonetheless, what we knew is there wouldn't be necessarily quote unquote state participation. And so the cities of Nashua and Manchester got together, and the mayors and some key senior staff talked about some ideas and concepts, and all very much still very on the table in terms of continuing that study that was paused. If we were to do that design development phase project, it'd be $1 million-ish, and we would need to fund that. And that is obviously an ongoing conversation that we are absolutely not ruling out, but we understand that here in Nashua that there's also possibly a Nashua first approach. And so fast forwarding through the summertime, there was some internal conversations here in the city about the idea of, well, could Nashua see if they could take over this design, this project design development phase, but have it be a somewhat tweak to it where it was a Nashua first type of incremental step. And with that being said, we engaged with AECOM, the consultant that was doing the statewide study. We had some initial conversations with them over the summertime about figuring out what a scope of work would be to basically do an assessment. And so what they came back to us with is basically a 2-phased approach of studying the feasibility of a Nashua first approach. And anything I should say we do here now does not rule out a potential larger, more wider implementation of the true capital corridor project. This would run in tandem or in parallel, but it would not be to anyone's detriment in that regard. And so anyway, with that being said, AECOM developed a scope of work in essentially 2 phases or 2 tasks. And so task 1 would be about $75,000, and that would be just initial conversations with the MBTA to understand what their appetite may be and whether we could actually feasibly or realistically implement a design development phase with the Nashua first approach. And so from there, we can make an assessment or a determination whether we want to continue on with what would definitely need to occur to have a full understanding of a Nashua First approach, which is, phase 2 is basically building out of a business plan and understanding what the operational plan would be. And that all in would be about $200,000 to $225,000 thereabouts. The entire project would, assessment would be $300,000. And then we would have some good data to decide whether we wanted to proceed with continuing the statewide level effort that occurred, that got paused about 6-9 months ago, where we would have to look at redoing environmental documents. We would have to look at potentially applying for some federal grant funding. But basically what we would do is, if we proceeded with that tweaked or amended design development phase based off of this work that we did, we would be at a 30% design or preliminary engineering, which would then put us in a position to actually be able to talk about federal dollars that could be made available to us. And that is a critical point that we need to get to be able to entertain the idea of actually implementing or executing based on some sort of federal match. So what I'm proposing and what I'm putting before you is the idea of us pursuing, and all we're doing is obligating ourselves to task 1 right now, which would be about $75,000, to have a conversation with the MBTA about a Nashua First approach. If we like what we hear, we would then continue on and elect to pursue task 2, and that total contract would be about $300,000. Again, none of that would necessarily apply to the million-ish dollars, and I don't know what the new dollar would be once we tweaked it to have it be a Nashua First approach, but I just want to be clear that this $300,000 couldn't be credited towards that dollar amount. And so we could then have that conversation about whether we actually want to pursue a Nashua First approach. Now, you may be asking yourself, why would we elect to pursue a Nashua First approach? Because it appeared through the media that came out when this project got stopped that it was going to be very expensive and cost prohibitive. I don't know that to be true. I know it's certainly suggested to be the case, but at the analysis that was provided to us by AECOM is that from Lowell to Nashua, we know that it is going to be approximately $120 million, $150 million, somewhere in that range. And under that study, it suggests that maybe the MBTA would be willing to pick up that costs. And I'm assuming for this conversation that not to be true. And it would mean that the onus of that would have to fall on to the, onto the state of New Hampshire or the local level, in this case, the city of Nashua in some way. What I believe to be true is right now we have unprecedented federal infrastructure monies available to you, and the AECOM has suggested to us that it is not out of the realm of a possibility, and something that we should take seriously is a 50% match. So at a 50% match at between 120 and 150 million, you're talking about $60-ish million, you're talking about $80-ish million, which is significant monies, no doubt. But it is not out of the realm of feasible for the city of Nashua to undertake such a capital project. I would suggest to you, you could look at one of our good schools and see how much it costs us to build a new school, and this would be something along those lines of a comparable cost. But we don't even know whether that to be true until we actually start to do this design and this study. One of the elements at hand is a contemplating of a layover station. That layover station was always anticipated to be in Manchester. We may learn that we'll need to provide a layover station for the MBTA to be interested. And if that's the case, we need to figure that out. We may hear conversation with the MBTA and they'll rule it out right away to say that we really want to get further than Nashua if we're actually to take this project on. And that's absolutely fine and true. We don't know any of this to date. And so that's why I felt it important to bring this conversation to you, make a recommendation to you. For $75,000, we do some additional work, have a conversation with the appropriate community partners, with the appropriate stakeholders, the MBTA in particular, have an understanding as to what their appetite may be. If there is an interest in continuing on, you have a business plan that would get developed, and you'd have an understanding of what that operational model would be. And then we could have another further conversation of whether we want to continue this Nashua first approach. And so with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to have this conversation with you this evening. I want to because I anticipate an escrow being asked for to be able to fund this study. And I just didn't want to, not have an opportunity to have this conversation before the escrow process was upon you. And so with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I would hand it off to Director Sullivan for any additional comments in case I left anything out, but I thought I would just try to provide a quick overview as to where we're at right now.
Mr. Chair, I'll be very brief. Director Cummings has left me quite speechless, and with very little ground to cover. I would only use the time to quickly reiterate that the fact that the timing of the Governor and Council decision to not renew the contract, or extend the contract rather, was particularly problematic based on the scope of work that remained within that study. And critically, what I'm referring to is the fact that at that time, significant coordination, or really much coordination, had not taken place with the MBTA and FTA about the viability of actually completing the project. And so, to come back to the scope of the work that's right in front of you this evening, I would suggest the $75,000 being specifically contemplated as part of the sort of task one of this work is critical not only for the city of Nashua, but for other potential communities in the region that might be interested in an extension. And so I would just recommend to this body that this $75,000, in my opinion, is a wise use of funds to at least explore what the possibilities of this project might look like. We're certainly not suggesting, neither Director Cummings nor I are suggesting that $60 million of capital investment is the right thing for this board and this community to do. We simply need to know what that cost would look like, what coordination steps might be needed to be taken, what funding opportunities might exist, and more importantly, what infrastructure would actually be needed. We feel that this $75,000 and the phase one work is particularly critical to doing that. Obviously, phase two work relative to the ridership scenarios and the different build-out options is important, but this sort of what we've referred to colloquially as a no-go or go indication as part of coordination, we think is very, very important. And so I'd add only that to reiterate Director Cummings' comments, and I think we'd be happy to answer any questions that this committee has.
Okay. Did you, Alderman Jettie, you as well? I'm going to put you in the queue. All right. Mr. Cummings, I'm glad that you, the chair does have a couple of points I want to clean up. I'm glad that you mentioned the MBTA. A lot of people may be assuming that you're talking from the Massachusetts border to Lowell, the continuation. But from working on this project for about 16 years up at the State House, the MBTA has full passenger authority in the state of New Hampshire. I don't know how that ever happened, but it does happen. So they need to be an active participants with this as well. So, and I'm kind of hoping maybe with this 75,000 will open up the door for opportunity for discussion. But what I really would like to head home on a fiscal matter, this is to me somewhat short money on something that's very important to look at. But where is the 75,000 going to actually come from? As far as in our books and everything.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first, a little history on the passenger rights. So as you may or may not know, there are differing rights that you can own when it comes to railroads, and the particular rights at hand that we're talking about are what's called passenger rights. The MBTA, through, as I understand it, settlement based on the Big Dig, acquired the passenger rights for the expansion of passenger rail into the state of New Hampshire by Pan Am back when there was some work done in Charlestown in the rail yard in and around that area. And so that is why we need to specifically work with the MBTA on this very particular subject matter. Relative to where this monies would come from, and this kind of gets into a broader conversation relative to the escrows. And so we have some surplus monies based off of last year's budgeting. I would put before you, it is entirely appropriate and a very wise use of monies to put towards capital projects or projects in general that have a beginning and a middle and an end through an escrow process. Otherwise, you would be hampering this community or any municipality's ability to actually implement projects. You would essentially, there's only 2 times a year, essentially, when you have an opportunity to initiate or execute on projects during your traditional spring budgeting season and then during your fall surplus escrowing process. And so what I recommend, because I would hate for us to lose another 6-9 months by just waiting to next spring's budget to use some available monies to us, particularly through excess economic development salary, which is where this would be coming from. I had recommended that we put it into the escrow, and I believe it is actually before the Budget Review Committee.
Okay, so this would start in approving $75,000 in this committee, but then it would be transferred to the Budget Committee, correct?
No, Mr. Chairman, no. So this is an informal conversation that I wanted to put before you, really in an effort to be transparent and provide an opportunity to have a conversation before it actually was taking up at budget review during the
Okay,
legislation
very good.
that is
Yeah.
officially filed.
Outstanding, good. All right, we have several people that would like to speak. We have Alderman Tebow, Lopez, and Jettie in the queue. So Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I have a couple questions that are quick. But I think the 75,000 is a no-brainer. We would be really, it would be a disservice to the city if we didn't at least take a look at this. And like you said, that's short money, or like Director Sullivan said, short money. So I think we have to do it. I think it's the right thing. My 2 questions are, one, the mayor of Manchester, Mayor Craig, seems to be all for passenger rail. So my first question is, why is Manchester not part of this? And then 2, when you said about federal monies, are you talking about those toll credits that are available, or is that something we can't get because we're not going with the state, or is that something we could still access?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
I was not referring to toll credits at all. What I was referring to is just federal, what is termed grant monies. It's discretionary money through the federal agencies, federal transportation agencies in particular, where they provide, dollars for capital projects. And there's, we know that there's been some transportation bond bills at the federal level that has authorized, unprecedented amount of funding that is making its way through agencies where we would need to make an application. And to be able to make application, you have to be at a certain level of design.
Could we use those toll credits or no?
I don't believe we could, that would be a state level, and maybe in the future, and that is a conversation to be had. But this would be, really a project driven, not at the state level, but at the local or regional level. Relative to your question about Manchester, and I want to be clear on this point, this is not to the exclusion of Manchester. And I think, we absolutely would welcome Manchester to be part of the conversation. This is I refer to this as a Nashua first approach. This is not a Nashua only approach.
May I quickly add, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, yes, go ahead.
Just very briefly to add on to Director Cummings' comments about the second question, we certainly do not want to suggest that Mayor Craig is not supportive of commuter rail extension. That's not the objective of this scope of work. The conversation with the city of Manchester and the staff in Manchester is ongoing, and that may sound cliche, but it is true. It's an active conversation right now. I think what we're really trying to do is capture both the ripeness of the work that's been done to date and the momentum behind that work, and recognize that we likely have resources available to continue that work today. Manchester's conversation is ongoing about the availability of those resources, but that may change at any point in time. But we certainly think that it would be good and wise for us to have an understanding of what this Nashua First option might look like, recognizing that there's a capital component to this project that may take even more time and involve more agencies and parties. And so I think even if Manchester does ultimately come aboard, which I think we're certainly hopeful that they will, this conversation has value, and this study work does have value based on the capital costs that we know will be involved.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I may, as a state rep to Alderman Tebow, the toll credit concept is discussed in the state as part of a possible funding mechanism. It's an idea, it's conceptual. There's nothing really etched in stone. So that the people know it, that's why you pay a toll on the Everett Turnpike. And all that money that gets collected is supposed to singly just go to the turnpike. But where it builds up some escrow monies, we were looking at perhaps maybe that could be a source of funding. But that's if the state jumped in, and to include Manchester would be the best. That doesn't mean that the door can't be open for negotiations on this end of the project. You know, it has to come through Nashua no matter what, where it goes. That's where Nashua gets the term gate city, because we were the gateway to New Hampshire via the railroad. So we're kind of following, we were kind of closed-minded in 1968 when they stopped commuter rail. Very short time later, now we're trying to get it back. Talk about short-sightedness. Somebody saved a buck, I guess, but this is basically it. We do have people, so that would be you, Alderman Jettie, yes. Excuse me, no, Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I mean, it
Yeah,
might be a
I don't
short,
get excited, I saw your hand. So,
like that 1968 was a short time for some people, but a lifetime for others. But Director Cummings, I just wanted to clarify, there was some social media commentary about how the mayor was planning on spending millions of dollars to build a Grand Central Station. The original article has disappeared. The conversation and the debate around it has continued, which is one of the problems with social media, is the original poster can retract the post, and then, you know, what is there to look at? I believe the original comment was just because Mayor Craig, during her campaign, made comments that were favorable to rail, and Mayor Donchis expressed that he generally agreed that it would have a lot of economic benefits. So following that, I had reached out to you and said, like, are there any plans? Can we get some presentation, all that kind of stuff? So I think your presentation tonight is very well timed for that purpose. I think it's also important to point out that the $78,000 that we would be spending here, it's been referred to a couple of times in different ways, but I would consider it a rule out. When you're trying to diagnose, you also have to rule out things that it's not. Like if you have somebody who's super hyperactive and, you know, unusually manic, you don't want to start diagnosing them as psychotic if you didn't make sure they're not high or like intoxicated or any number of things that you should rule out. So likewise, if we're going to engage in any kind of future development along rail, we should rule out whether or not it's a bad idea from the start. So that Nashua First model, you know, at least getting us to the starting point of engaging the MBTA, and in the handout that you gave, it also identified engaging the state of New Hampshire. We can't move forward without engaging those two entities. So spending the money to do that rules out whether this is a non-starter. If we can engage them positively and we can get some traction in terms of willingness to contribute monies, bring the price down to a reasonable investment on the part of Nashua taxpayers, that's a benefit. But the second part is it also allows us to provide publicly available and factual information.
That's right.
As opposed to rumors and social media posts that get a lot of traction and a lot of back and forth, even though the original post is gone.
And so to that point, Mr. Chairman, that's one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to have this conversation. There's a lot of hyperbole out there, and I feel it's important for us to have facts. It's you all that have to make the decision. As the policymakers, I can make recommendations to you, I can provide options and advice, but ultimately, I felt it important to bring this before you so you can make this decision. One, I wholeheartedly recommend. I think it would be a disservice not to explore this conversation.
And if I might just follow up to the chair.
Follow up, yes, follow up.
One of the claims, or one of the comments that I pointed out was that any plan, any actual plan coming before the city would come before this committee. And a plan hasn't been presented in years, since I think Boston Surface Rail at least, and that was their plan. So that's what I think citizens should know, is that any talk of planning or resources should come with how it was presented to the aldermen, not just the rumors that it might have been, and everyone's responsible for going to look it up. As far as I know, the infrastructure committee hasn't actually had any plan other than right now, which is more the idea to fund the study to develop the possibility of a plan or to determine if a plan is worth it.
Okay, we have Alderman Jettie with Alderman Clee in the queue.
Thank you. So I think that 75,000 seems like a pretty low number and well worth it. But having been former chairman of the National Regional Planning Commission, the idea that you talk about a national first, and I understand that, but there are a lot of towns that make up. We are part of the National Regional Planning Commission, and there are a lot of towns that make up. I think it's 13, but so the 75,000 sounds like a small number. And for that reason, I'm wondering, if we talk to our neighbors who would benefit from this as well as Nashua, when you're talking 75,000, dividing that up by 13 comes up with some pretty low numbers. I don't want to make your job more difficult, and I don't want to, throw a wrench in the works here, because I know you oftentimes have to operate on fairly short timelines. But the idea of approaching our neighbors to see whether or not we could get them to share in this, if we're talking small, amounts of money, they may be more willing to do that, and it may get them on board to the whole concept. And, which if this is in fact feasible, a regional approach would be more attractive, I think, to the federal money that we're looking after. So I just throw that out as a concept, a suggestion.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a great idea. I think it's a wonderful concept. I completely agree with you. I will say for the record, I don't think it would be fair to put this entire burden onto the Nashua taxpayer when it is a regional benefit. I'm not sure we will get that cooperation at the end of the day. I'm not sure that there will be that vision that Nashua has. But we should not rule out the possibility of having that conversation. I'd twist a little bit about what you're saying in the fact that I wouldn't necessarily want to do it for this feasibility study per se, but I think it absolutely needs to occur with developing an operational plan and a capital plan. And so I would think that would absolutely be part of the conversation for the development of those business plans. And one I think that we could have, and I would want to have. I've thought about this long and hard myself as to whether, and I'm making this up. I don't have any guidance or any data yet to support this, but in conversations with Director Sullivan, when we were trying to scope this concept out, thinking a few steps ahead, Is it that Nashua residents get charged X amount of dollars operationally, and then non-Nashua residents get charged Y amount of money to ride the train? Maybe, I don't know, but I think that that is absolutely going to be a variable or an ingredient that gets added to the mix. And so we need to have that conversation.
Thank you.
Alderman Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I wanted to, one of the things I said that I went on the mill tour, and one of the things that I had not realized was the original rail for New Hampshire was right here in Nashua. In 1838, the Nashua/Lowell Railroad came into here, so we were the first rail into the state, so I'd love to see us bring that back. It's what brought us to become the mill that we are. But now, putting that aside, I'm glad that Alderman Jettie brought up the working with the other communities and so on. I also liked your idea, because I had written it down, of potentially, when we get to that point, maybe if the burden does fall more on our taxpayers, that there's a benefit to it. Kind of like the Easy Pass was when it first came, if you got it from your state and so on. But the thing that I want to comment, and this is probably a diss towards other communities, having been in the State House and having seen rail tossed around like a political football, it's always been someone else take care of the burden and so on. So I would love to us do the 75,000, kind of get that ball rolling, and then to try to get the other communities buy-in with a plan that if you buy in, you're going to pay the same as the Nashua residents. Kind of almost put that forward to incentivize them, because otherwise what I found was the North didn't give a darn about the South, and they had as much, if not more, voting power than we had down here, and that's why things die. So I would like to almost put an incentive plan in. If we all work together, this is what your benefit is going to be. I think that's really important. But as we stand now, just talking about the 75,000, I would be very for going forward with it. So, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Gaveva.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. More of a statement here, but I think I agree with what was said by our previous speakers. There needs to be some sort of incentive by the Nashua taxpayer, especially if they take on a majority of this burden. We're talking, if we go through with this project from A to Z, this is substantial. This is a lot of money that's going to be spent. And as much as I love serving the region as a hub to get to Boston, they're not the ones paying for it, and we are. And I think there has to be a very big part of the conversation is, how do we make this enticing? How do I go to my ward and tell the residents that this is the right thing to do, and here's what you're going to get from it? But everybody else in surrounding communities could also do this, but they're just going to let us pay the bill, and they'll drive 15 minutes from Hudson and take the train and be in perfectly. I think it's those type of conversations that have to happen, and I think it's a hard thing to monitor, but I think to have a successful plan in place for rail in Nashua, I think we need a good incentive for our Nashua taxpayers, who at the end of the day will probably end up footing a big chunk of this bill, if not all. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more, Mr. Chairman, with Alderman Guevea's comments. I think that what we're looking to do is to bring in the experts and the consultants to the table so we can have this conversation, this very sophisticated conversation, with some confidence that we're getting the right, accurate information so decisions can be made. And I think, they will provide, some of this background intelligence, maybe tell us a little bit how we could structure it in a way that is feasible. Places, have done this previously and how it's been successful. And then we can go from there. I mean, I completely agree with one of the guiding principles that I think needs to be at the onset of this conversation is, if we do a Nashua first approach, how do we make sure it's fair to the Nashua taxpayer? And what that actually is at the end of the day, I don't know yet. But if we can kind of state that affirmatively at the beginning, and recognize that is our value, I think we would be positioning ourselves very well for a conversation.
Alderman Como.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Director Cummings, as part of this study, is one of the things they're going to be looking at potential ridership? Because I know I actually ride the Lowell line fairly often, and it's not like people are fighting for seats on those, except for maybe a couple of times a week. Certainly not the way that you got to fight your way onto a green line after a Red Sox game. But when we talk about this being cost effective, in my mind, it's not just how much will it cost us to build the station and the line and everything, but will we sell enough tickets for riders that it's going to make it worth our while in the first place? Is ridership something that we're going to look at with the scope of the study?
Yes, absolutely. When I say the business plan or the operational model, that would be taking absolutely some ridership forecasting and implementing it into the mix, so you have that data to be able to make a decision. That would come in task 2, though, to be clear.
Right.
So right now, task 1, to kind of break it all down, is let's take the temperature of the MBTA. And then task 2 is let's develop the business plan and see if between the two there's a feasibility where we can, make a go, no-go type of assessment.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Theobald. Did you
just
have something?
quickly, if I may, I
Yes,
do
you
want to
may.
point out, thank you, Mr. Chair, that the coordination in task 1 is not simply with the MBTA, but there are several other jurisdictions and entities involved here. New Hampshire Department of Transportation was mentioned, but it's also critical to point out that our friends at CSX are an active stakeholder and owner in this case, and have had some engagement with the prior work done at the state level, but have not been engaged in some time. And so they're a critical stakeholder, as is Mass DOT. And so those parties are outlined in the task 1 scope of work in front of you, but it's really that 4-pronged outreach and coordination that's being done within task 1, and then a presentation of the results of that outreach to the city, closing out that task 1 work.
Okay. Alderman Theobald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I hope, and I would think that every single alderman and alderwoman here in Nashua would be 100% for, other people are using it, we don't want to foot the whole bill. That's something that I think at some point we will have to have going, as the project goes or doesn't go forward. I think, we got to protect our own in that case, right? But I think, in some ways we're putting the cart before the horse, right? We want to see what we can get, the $75,000, get the study. So I assume right now you're going to the next step is you're taking this to the Budget Committee. The Budget Committee will decide if, they'll talk about it, decide if we go forward with it, and then it comes to us as the Board of Aldermen to go forward there, and then you guys would start the finishing of the study or this first task study.
The start of the study, that would be the.
Start of the study,
We would
okay.
start the study.
Okay, so you're not finishing what they were already working on. Your task 1 is the beginning of a brand-new study on this.
Correct.
Okay, and that will tell us the stuff that we'll need to know in the future for the next committee, I guess. I don't know where we go after that, but.
Well, then you'd have to make an assessment based on whether it's feasible or not.
Okay.
Let's assume it's not feasible, right?
Yeah.
Let's assume that it's not feasible. Then you're gonna need to make a decision as to whether we wanna, pursue the contract that got, that did not get extended, which the unfinished scope of work was somewhere in the order of magnitude of about $1 million, a little less than that maybe. And that would be environmental permitting and some grant applications at the federal level, but you'd be at 30% design predicated with some assumptions. It's predicated on some assumptions. You'd have to, basically then decide to continue with that project and that to bring it to the next level of design. And that would be executing the quote-unquote capital corridor project up to Manchester. If it comes back and says this is feasible, then what would occur is we would need to develop a scope that would amend the project that did not continue and adapt it, if you will, taking the prior work and basically make it an incremental approach to the capital corridor study, using a lot of work that was done prior, and then adding in some new work based on this more incremental approach. And that may not be $1 million, that may be $1 million. We will find that out when we get there, and then we can elect to proceed.
Great, thank you.
I would just like to say, in my involvement up at the state level with this, one of the selling points, I had a chairman of the Transportation Committee, and he was all about flying cars, and says, you know, they're gonna replace commuter rail. And I'm thinking, oh, they're gonna expand Logan? You know, here's the rub. You wanna go to Boston, what are you gonna do with your car? I don't care if it's electric, runs on gasoline, coal, steam, or you fly it down there. What are you gonna do with it? The rate of parking. So it's looking at the future. Why not give our citizens the opportunity to go down to Boston and earn the Boston working wage, and then to come back with a paycheck and spend it right here in good old tax-free New Hampshire? It makes perfect sense to me, and it's one of the things that I have been working on. Now, unfortunately with the state, yeah, they got cows up north. They don't want to spend money on the police force because they talk to state police to come in and help them out, yet we in Nashua pay for the state police force to give them protection. They don't have a fire department, and actually what happens is we end up plowing their roads, state roads. I don't see plow trucks going on Route 130 in our city. And so we take care of a lot of things, but unfortunately, to try to get this concept up in Concord, to get it through, has been a political battle
So, Mr. Chairman,
that is too bad.
Mr. Chairman, what I like to do is I like to think about the positives that come about through this project. And one of the ones that comes back to mind every time I study this is the idea that we'll be removing single vehicular vehicles off of the Everett Turnpike and Route 3. The congestion that builds up that I think a lot of Nashua residents sit in when you get to Lowell trying to get onto Route 95. We'll be moving some of those single occupancy vehicles
Right.
off of the roadway. The environmental stewardship through this type of project is going to be absolutely amazing. And it's one of the things that I think gets lost from time to time that, I think we should be cognizant of as we think about the positive attributes to potentially implementing such a project.
Well stated, I couldn't agree with you more, but to keep it going, Alderman Clee,
Thank you.
we'll let you do cleanup.
Well, I don't know if it'll be cleanup, I may have. A couple of comments and a question. I'd asked Director Sullivan here, when looking through the document, about whether or not the discussions with CSX and so on have taken place, or if this is the plan, and I got a little bit of yes. So that I know a tiny conversation at a very low level have happened with CSX. I know that in the conversation that we had about those that were on the homeless on Temple Street, as well as talking about the rail here going across Main Street, one of the comments in our conversation that CSX had kind of alluded to was that they're trying to upgrade and fix their tracks so that they can handle people in these trains, which right now they can't do. So I just want to kind of put that out, is that we can see that they're moving towards a positive direction too, which gives me some encouragement. And nice to know that they're part of this project as well. The last page of your document, where it talks about the job hours and labor classification, this is for the overall, because it has a price tag here of $280,000. Is that $75,000 plus the $225,000, and this is kind of the guesstimate of what the overall project would be, not just that first step of the $75,000. Is that what this is here?
That's correct. So what you're seeing in the last page is, again, it's a guesstimate.
Okay.
It does not have a contingency built into it, but it is basically task one, or phase one, is going to be about $75,000 when you include miscellaneous expenses, and then task two is the remainder, which brings you up to that $280,000. And again, having done this enough times now, we're dealing with design professionals and engineers. Things come up along the way where we're going to need to potentially spend some additional monies unanticipated. This doesn't have a contingency, so if you were to add in another 10% onto the 280 or the 260,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about $300,000.
Mr. Mr. Chairman?
Follow up?
Yeah, just a quick question. So the reason I brought this up was because of the dollar amount, but to also, it kind of outlines the tasks. You know, I know it's within the documentation, but when we talk about task 2, the very first item is the ridership forecasting, which was brought up earlier. So I just wanted to point out that that is built into the second portion of this task. So thank you.
Okay, any further questions on the tentative commuter rail project? Okay, seeing none. Director, yes?
Yeah, well, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to thank you all. I'm very thankful for this
Well,
conversation.
I'm not letting you off the hook yet. You did say that if somebody wants to field an off-topic question, you would be available, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so before you get into the, before you get the exit, does anybody have anything that want to bring up to Assistant Director Cummings or to Director Matt Sullivan? Yes, Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When will we get another presentation or another update on the parking garages? Because that's something that I know Alderman O'Brien has brought up several times, and it's something that I feel is very important, that we don't get to a point where it's too late to fix them in a reasonable time, and the building costs are constantly going up and things like that. So I see some smiles. So do you
Well,
guys
look
have
at
an
the
update?
time.
Well, yeah.
It's actually, no,
So,
We don't have a cutoff here.
no, we have an update.
Director Sullivan and I participated in a parking interview, ironically enough, this afternoon, where we are looking to bring on what's called an owner's project manager to manage the construction project with the design professionals and the construction manager. I could say with some confidence that it's probably a November timeframe when we'll have an official report to give to you, because we have interviews going on in October. I would anticipate, after we finish the interview process, we'll be able to provide you a better, more comprehensive update in November. And with an anticipation of us really kind of getting into the project sometime next spring. Remember, we are under design right now, and I can provide you an update as to where we are with design in November.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, positively, we are actively working on it. There's been a couple of meetings, and once we get some more engineering reports, come back with a solution, but been very informative. Anybody else? Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. So, since we're talking about things that have been on the back burner for a while, what about the parking study itself? The parking study is complete. We've had a report. What about implementing any changes that
Yep.
Do you wanna-
came about as a result of that study?
Do you want to field that,
Yeah,
Director?
happy to, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman. So just what we are working on right now is actually the development of a business plan or a business model to take the very first recommendation that was made that would move the parking service that is provided here in Nashua into an enterprise type model where the expenses and the revenue would be covered, not borne by the Nashua taxpayer. Right now, Andy Hill, our consultant with Desmond, is working actively on developing that business model. Has met extensively with actually CFO Griffin over the last 4 weeks or so. And we'll be developing this pro forma for us, which I hope to bring before you sometime before the calendar year. Because I would like to suggest, to your point, that we come to some sort of decision on that before the budget next spring.
Okay, thank you.
When we, Alderman Jettie, and I'm sure you remember, when we started this sojourn of the parking study and overnight parking, like I said, there's no quick fix to this, but it's actively on the front burner still. There are meetings and working with Jill Stanfield of the parking department, and like you say, Mr. Hill and everything, so we're heading to the goal. So, it's being done in phases, so it's working out pretty good, I have to say, and identifying some of the problems that were brought up in some of the areas and discuss some of the towing issues and everything else. So new stuff keeps coming in, so we are handling it, so it is good. Yeah, anybody else? Seeing none, now I'll give it to you for cleanup there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate tonight's conversation. I'll note that it was relatively positive with everyone. I didn't really hear too much negativity. If I misunderstand some of that feedback from you all, please correct me, let me know along the way. But I think this was a good continuing conversation of subjects that we've been discussing along the way. Absent any direction otherwise, I'll just continue moving along as I've previously discussed with you. And so I wanted to just take this opportunity to thank you for allowing me to be here tonight to present. I want to just kind of wrap up by saying I only talked about 3 topics tonight, and then we obviously started to get into the parking garages. There's a couple other projects I could come before you and speak on that I'd love to provide an update on. Elm Street Middle School, Court Street Theater. These are kind of just some items that are hanging out there as well that are important for you to know, that I would love to provide you all a status update on. And I'd be happy to come before you at another meeting at some point to provide some of those updates as well. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I would, sure, with the permission of the committee, which I think I could have here, if the docket's light, not heavy, maybe we can take individual subject matters.
NIMCO's another one.
Yeah,
So.
to bring it up.
Yep.
So, seeing if there's an interest with that, I'll work with you on that for scheduling.
Please,
We'd
thank
like
you.
to have you.
Thank you, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, the committee would like to thank you, Mr. Sullivan, and your crew here for coming this evening and informing us. It was, I think, it's good for us in the committee, great for the public, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to unfinished business,
There's none.
new business resolutions,
There are none.
new business ordinances.
There are none.
There is an item that is tabled to the committee, but we do not, it's still in negotiations, so it's not ready for prime time yet. General discussion. Anybody have anything? Seeing none. Public comment. All right. Can you identify yourself and your address? And you have 3 minutes to speak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Representative Marty Jack, 83 Cadigan Way, and I'm on the Public Works and Highways Committee. I thought I would take the opportunity to explain what a toll credit is. Toll credits are not money. They arise when the turnpike system does work on the turnpike. It goes back to the fact that the turnpike system predates the interstate system, and part of the turnpike system has interstate numbering. So some of the time when we do work on the turnpike, it creates if we spend $1 on the turnpike, it creates $1 in toll credit. The only thing a toll credit can be used for, typically on a highway project, it will be 80% federal, 20% state. So a toll credit can be used to supply the 20% match, even though it is not money. Then you have to supply the full cost of the product in the federal funds. When we did the project development phase, I added a special provision in the toll credit statute that the toll credits could be used to match the project development phase, which was federal transit dollars. That is not normally the case, and that was a special exception. I am shocked to hear that no one has any idea what the Commonwealth of Massachusetts thinks of the national-only option. This was, things do change, so I wouldn't oppose spending the money now, but a few years ago, we did know the answer to that. Thank you.
Okay, very good, thank you. Anybody else in the audience want to come up? Yes, Assistant Director Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to clarify what the previous speaker just said. So I think it's pretty fair to say that there is, at least through the New Hampshire DOT, a good understanding to the MBTA's appetite relative to the capital corridor. plan or project that is what what the current project was before Governor's Council. I don't believe we have a good solid footing or understanding relative to a Nashua First approach, that I think having additional further conversations with the MBTA to understand the suitability of this is really the genesis for this particular conversation, that particular study at hand right now. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Anybody else for public comment? Seeing no one, move on to remarks from Alderman. Seeing none, Alderman Como, do you have something special for us?
I do indeed, my favorite motion. I would like to make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all for coming. And I'll declare the meeting closed at 8:55.